I have to say the inspiration comes from you, colleagues, and I'm only here because of you and the inspiration that you give to me each and every day, and the support that you give to me each and every day. Can I just say how fantastic it is and how pleased I am to be addressing this conference today in person as your General Secretary, proud of our membership and of our Women's Conference, which I remember when the idea was formed many years ago to run these equalities conferences. Well, frankly, we were not pushing at an open door at that time. It was a fight. It was a fight to get these conferences established and to get them part of the repertoire of what the NASUWT is about and what we stand for. And thank goodness we did it, and thank goodness that we persisted in doing so despite the criticism that we faced. Really proud of this conference and proud that we're bringing together members from all corners of the UK, from the Channel Islands and from the Isle of Man too. Proud of you, our lay leadership, which is always making the big calls on the big issues facing our members in schools and colleges and for the teaching profession as well. Colleagues, the last few years, you don't need me to tell you, have been challenging times for our members, but we've overcome those challenges and we've overcome them by standing together. But we continue to face challenging times, not least with the worst cost of living crisis for almost 50 years. Teachers struggling to make ends meet, worried about how they're going to pay their rent and mortgages, how they're going to put food on the table, how they're going to heat their homes this winter, or pay the rising cost of travelling to and from work. And colleagues, with the recent fiscal event, or mini-budget as the government would want to call it, from the Westminster government, it looks like there's worse yet to come. The government has spent billions of your money on tax cuts for the richest individuals and corporations. They've removed the cap on bankers' bonuses. Can you believe it? They've cut corporation tax, a tax giveaway to the richest 1%, whilst the rest of us are asked to pay the price for it now and for years to come. And what that will mean is yet more cuts. Billions of pounds of cuts to our public services and to our schools and colleges, cutting back even further on what public services have already been through, pared to the bone over the course of the last decade and more. And regardless of where you are in the UK or elsewhere, you are going to see the impact of that. That impact will be felt. In the last few days, the government in Westminster has been clear that they intend to traduce our public services by insisting on even more public spending cuts and rolling back your rights at work. They say your rights are a barrier to economic growth. Your rights, hard-won rights, fundamental rights, rights to paid annual leave, paid parental leave, equal pay and anti-discrimination. You know, at the Tory party conference in this city, in Birmingham, earlier this week, the Prime Minister said that she would, by the end of this year, remove all EU-inspired red tape. That will become history, she said. That's a promise to remove your existing rights derived from EU regulations and directives, rights, by the way, which were promised to be guaranteed during the Brexit referendum. The Working Time Directive, the 48-hour maximum working time limit, paid parental leave rights, part-time workers' rights, redundancy rights and protections, temporary and fixed-term workers' rights, the rights to equal treatment in employment and prohibiting employment discrimination on the grounds of sex, religion, belief, disability, age, race and sexual orientation. 2P rights, that is to say, rights arising from the transfer of workers from one employer to another, including the rights of teachers who were transferred from one school to another under the government's academisation programme in England. These are the rights that the Prime Minister says are holding back economic growth. Colleagues, we can never accept that securing the economic growth that's been denied to us by this government for more than a decade, that should be done at the expense of working people and their families. We can never accept a government that puts ideology ahead of the safety of our members, their families and communities, where austerity policies will mean that children will go to bed hungry and the elderly will die of cold this winter. That's not the world that we want. It's indecent, it's immoral, and it's plain wrong. You know, pay and the cost of living crisis is now at the top of our members' concerns. Year on year, real terms pay cuts are driving teachers out of the profession. Now, all we want is a decent wage for teachers so that you can continue to do the amazing job that you do every day. All we want is for you to be rewarded properly and fairly for the work that you do so that you can look after your families and pay your bills. But since 2010, your pay has been frozen, capped and cut at levels below inflation. The value of teachers' pay will have fallen in real terms by 25% since 2010. Well, what does that mean? Well, for a typical classroom teacher today, you are now £50,000 worse off than you would have been had your pay kept pace with inflation over the course of the last decade. And this year, against a backdrop of soaring inflation, you and other teachers are being offered the biggest pay cut in real terms for a generation. Teachers' earnings, even with the proposed pay awards on offer, will still lag behind the levels that they were at in 2010. And not only is a below-inflation pay award unacceptable, but to rub salt in the wounds, colleagues, the government's even refusing to pay for it, refusing to give schools the additional money that they need to pay you properly. They're putting at risk your pay and also your jobs. That could mean the loss of yet more teaching and support staff. It could mean that teaching vacancies in your schools are not filled. Larger class sizes, fewer resources, reduced access to specialist support that you need and that the pupils that you teach need as well. And more work will inevitably be piled onto teachers who are already struggling. Now, I want to say this. Our response is crucial. And one part of our response, which often doesn't get much mention, but I think it deserves a mention here, at the height of a cost of living crisis. You know, I'm proud that at times like these, our work in support of our members is unrivaled. Our information, our advice, and our representation. But I make mention of our benevolence support. support for our members in financial difficulty. It's vitally important, colleagues, that we tell our other colleagues about that support which the NASUWT has to offer, and we say to our members who are struggling financially to seek the support of their union. It's right that we continue to make that support available. It's right that it continues to be a priority for us, and it will be. But you know this, it's no longer possible for us to wait for the storm to pass. I say this, colleagues, enough is enough. The government has been gambling with our children's futures. They've been pushing more and more of our schools, colleges and public services to the brink, cutting jobs, cutting pay, cutting your pensions, cutting back on welfare support. And you know what? It's women who suffer the most. Once again, we are seeing a deliberate and willful assault from this government targeting women, the backbone of our public services, care workers, nurses, midwives, doctors, civil servants, of course, teachers. These are targeted cuts to women's pay and your living standards, a policy of austerity which even the United Nations condemned more or less a decade ago. And this government is doing what they're doing because they believe that they can get away with it. Because for years they've worked on the principle that they can get away with paying you as little as possible. For years, they've asserted that schools, the NHS, social care can be run on a shoestring with a majority female workforce working around the clock. For years, they've inflicted pay cuts and financial misery onto women. For years, they've allowed the widening gender pay gap to go unchecked in our schools and colleges, allowing women's pay to fall further and further behind the pay of men. And on top of that, colleagues, is the continuing injustice of teachers' pensions, including the scandal that supply teachers, predominantly women, who are doing the same work as any other teacher, is being denied access to the teachers' pension scheme. Colleagues, it's absolutely outrageous. It's outrageous that we're seeing teachers' living standards falling at a time when the country should be investing more and more in securing children's education recovery after the pandemic. It's unacceptable that teachers are being forced to work longer and longer, harder and harder, but being rewarded less and less in real terms. We know that members like you are struggling. 9 in 10 of you are worried about your finances, taking second or third jobs, using food banks. 1 in 5 of you struggling with rent and mortgages. Almost 2/3 of you using up your savings to pay your monthly bills. And according to Income's data research, an independent body, teachers' pay, your pay, is now at the bottom of the graduate league table when it comes to pay. So no wonder, colleagues, no wonder we're seeing an exodus of teachers and head teachers from the profession, citing pay as an issue. 73% of teachers say that they've seriously considered quitting the job altogether in the last 12 months. And the evidence of the deepening teacher recruitment and retention crisis is stark. 1/3 of teachers leaving the profession in the first 5 years. The number of vacancies up by 62%. Initial teacher training targets missed year after year after year. There are fewer teachers wanting to become head teachers, as we see the crisis in school leadership, teachers bringing forward their plans for retirement. Well, that's not good for our profession, colleagues, but it's certainly not good for children's education. So, colleagues, it's right to be angry about that. Don't apologise about being angry about what has been done to our profession. You deserve better, teachers deserve better, and so do the pupils that you teach. So our demand to address that systemic challenge that I've described is for a restorative pay award for teachers and head teachers, starting with 12% this year. We think that's reasonable. We think that's necessary to respond to the current crisis affecting the profession. And we want the government as well to ensure that schools have the money to deliver to teachers a pay award in full. But we know that to achieve that, we've got to maintain our pressure on the government. They've got to take your concerns seriously. So over the summer, we've been saying to ministers that they've got to recognise the seriousness of the situation. We've asked them to get around the table with us to address your concerns and to avert the risk of future industrial action. We've said they've got to stop taking the teaching profession for granted. But I have to tell you this, colleagues. It seems that ministers are hoping beyond hope that you and other teachers, that your anger is going to blow over. That they'll be able to, in the coming weeks and months, move on, we'll forget about all of this, and we'll focus on other things instead. Well, they are deluding themselves. Colleagues, we've waited. You've waited patiently, and we've acted responsibly. But I say this, time is now up. The teaching profession is united on this, and we're going to be confirming in the coming days the next phase of our campaign with a timetable for our ballot in Wales, in Scotland, and in England. And let's be very clear, industrial action will be the fault of government ministers who believe that they can get away with seeing our members suffering detriment to your pay and living standards. Now, I know the government's going to try and argue that industrial action won't change anything. But a strong vote, colleagues, an overwhelming vote from our members will make clear to ministers that teachers are deadly serious. Industrial action ballots, colleagues, do make a difference. They'll focus on the need to stop the delays, stop the denials, and force government to engage in meaningful negotiations. Colleagues, you've waited long enough. I do know that voting for industrial action is the last thing that you want. It's the last thing that members want generally. But you've been left with no choice. We either fight for the profession that we love, or we see more and more teachers, beginning teachers, experienced teachers, teachers across all age groups and backgrounds being forced out of the profession. And the first and most important action that you can take when you are balloted is to vote for a better deal for teachers. You know, if you want a pay rise, then you need to vote. If you're fed up with what's happened to your pay over the course of the last decade, or you're struggling to make ends meet, if you don't want to see even more real terms cuts to your pay, then you need to vote. If you agree that the pay award this year should be guaranteed to all teachers and be fully funded by government, no ifs or buts, then we need you to vote yes for strike action and for action short of strike action, and return your ballot paper as soon as you receive it. Don't sit back. Don't sit back, colleagues, and think that someone else can sort this out for you. You're the union. Your vote matters. It matters even more with the law often stacked against us and stacked against you as working people. Every vote really does count. Teachers didn't create this cost of living crisis, colleagues. But at the same time, you shouldn't be made to pay the price for it. The government has the power to find a resolution to our dispute. And the best way that you can ensure that they do that is for you and other members to vote yes, yes, for a better deal for teachers. Colleagues, I want to conclude by thanking our lay activists here today. The last 2 years have been incredibly difficult for every teacher. But our lay activists, who I describe as the beating heart of our union, you were prepared to stand up and be a voice for our members. And if you're not active in the union, other than attending events like this today, then get active in the union and be proud to be active in our union. Our lay activists were there for our members when often members felt that they had no one else on their side. Their actions, the actions of our lay activists, will not be forgotten. We're proud to be a union of strong members and representatives, strong women leading our union at every level. From the work of our Equal Opportunities Committee, our Women's Committee, and of course our National Executive, to the tireless leadership of our women reps in schools and colleges the length and breadth of the country. Secretaries and National Executive members like Geraldine, Anne and Nuala, leading our members across the Isle of Man and securing another historic ballot result on pay and working conditions. Yeah. I mean, against the odds, against what the Tories wanted to defy our members from doing. In the Isle of Man, they smashed the UK government's anti-trade union laws. And as a result of their leadership and the resolve of our members, we are taking action in the Isle of Man, which is now delivering a change of approach from the Isle of Man government. Fantastic. Think about our members in Northern Ireland. Tribute to our officers and our executive members there. I can name many. I'm going to mention Delma. I'm going to mention Shauna. I'm going to mention Sally, amongst others. Leading our Better Deal for Teachers campaign with industrial action in Northern Ireland, which has become an exemplar to other unions who have now gotten in line behind us to fight for a better deal for teachers in Northern Ireland and protecting teachers against excessive workload. I pay tribute to those lay activists building our union in Northern Ireland with more and more teachers joining us and more of our members being active as reps in schools. And you might have detected from my accent, it's not a Brummie accent, it's a black country accent. But anyway, here in Birmingham, kind of my hometown, pay tribute to our lay activists. The work of our activists such as Ava and Andrea and others their work in getting our Black Teachers Network off the ground, building on our big conversation events, ensuring that not only this month, in Black History Month, but every week, every month, we translate our words on racial justice into reality and into action. Thank you for what you have done and for your leadership too. And thank you, colleagues, those of you who've been involved in the union at any level. Members here today who've demonstrated their courage in the face of bullying and adverse management, their courage in standing up against violence and abuse at work and winning change, not only in your workplaces, but also across wider society, working together to stop sexual harassment and online sexual abuse within our schools. And I'm proud that we are also securing real change in transforming our national executive. Now with 80% of our National Officers Committee who are women, making the key decisions on behalf of all of our members, demonstrating what lay leadership means, demonstrating our ability, our capacity, our resolve and determination to fight for a better deal for every one of our members. And the work of our Sexual Harassment Task Force is changing the way that we work as a union, making every space within the NASUWT a safe and inclusive space for women. And through our action plan to tackle the gender pay gap, we're aiming to lead by example as a union, ensuring that at every level we tackle the inequalities that have persisted for far too long within our own structures. That's what it means, colleagues. That's what it means to be NASUWT, the teachers' union. It's your actions that make the difference. Your actions that secure the changes that we want to see. By standing together, by campaigning together, by demonstrating once again why the NASUWT is proud to be the teachers' union. Colleagues, stay safe, stay active. Thank you very much.
If there's anyone out there that haven't heard Patrick before, well, now you know what I mean when I say that he is inspiring, and he articulates far better than I do our cause and our struggle, colleagues. So we have a couple of minutes where we can, because at the end of this session we're going to have a photo opportunity where we're going to be doing our Better Deal for Teachers, hopefully. If you want to participate in that, we're going to have that. But before that, we do have a quick window if there's anybody who has a question for Patrick. I think we have some people with mics. If there's anyone with a photo wants a question, put your hand up and then we'll there we are, over there. Colleagues, if you give your name and your association, where you're from, that would be brilliant.
Hi Patrick, I'm Trishka Mayday from Portsmouth. I sent you an email a while back. I am really trying to be active in Portsmouth. I am every member, every teacher I come across, I say, what union are you in? Da-de-da-de-da-de-da. I have no literature, no promotional materials to give them, to the extent that the other day I was in a school as a supply teacher and I found some old papers in some old books and in my cupboard. I cut out NASUWT and I stuck it on there. I cut out the email address and I stuck it on there and I put, I am Trishka Mayday, Portsmouth Association Secretary. Please could you give us your updated details if you have moved school? I didn't have any literature from the union to do that. I had to make it myself. Can you please make sure we have the resources? Thank you.
My very quick answer. My answer is yes, we'll do that. No excuse. You must have that, and all of our reps need to have all the armoury that we can muster to support you in your role. And fantastic that when you are meeting with teachers in schools, whether as a supply teacher or as someone who's permanently employed, ask them the question, are you a member of a union? Why aren't you a member of the NASUWT? Get involved, join us and join in. That's the conversation that needs to be happening in every single school in the country, and we need to support you in having those conversations, and we will.
And there's a stand out there which has got NASUWT stand, so please get some of the materials for this, but also, you know, we will get some things to you, although our colleagues and our sisters and brothers in CW are making that a bit difficult to get things to you physically, but we will be getting things to you, emails and whatever that you can then print off and use at home. And we have lots and lots of things. So where else has we got somebody with a thing here? Anyway, we got somebody at the front here. If somebody can get a mic. Oh, yeah, there we are. We'll come to you in a minute. There we are. Thank you.
Hi, Patrick. Thank you very much for that. Patrick, you mentioned the government taking us for granted. Actually, I don't think they are taking us for granted. I think they're taking us for fools. And it's time we stood up and said, enough is enough. We need to return a yes, yes ballot. Enough is enough. We can't put up with this anymore. Thank you.
Well, Eva, I couldn't have put it better myself. I will adjust my speech accordingly. Any other suggestions on a postcard, please? But to be perfectly honest, Ava's absolutely right. Taking us for fools, they're taking the profession for fools, but frankly, they're taking the country for fools. I mean, it's absolutely outrageous what is going on. In the interests of supporting and lining the pockets of their mates, we are seeing tens of billions of pounds frankly being taken out of your pockets every single day. I mean, even when the governor of the Bank of England, not exactly one of my pen pals, it has to be said, particularly after his comments in the summer saying that, you know, working people should hold back on their demands for pay awards because it could make inflation worse. But even he had to, you know, call an emergency meeting of his Monetary Policy Committee because of the actions of this government to bail out pension funds, to ensure the security of your pensions and your investments. And I know that, you know, for teachers, you might think, well, I've got a public service pension. But to be honest, what we've seen happen to private sector pensions is going to come the way of public service pensions next year. And we're ready for that, colleagues. We are ready, not just as NASUWT, but with our colleagues in the TUC, the STUC, the WTUC, and the Irish Congress of Trade Unions to say that we won't have it. And as Ava said, enough is enough.
Yeah. Thank you. And colleagues, I would also add to what Patrick has said there. For, you know, we're having a pay cut, and as Patrick alluded to, 25%, £50,000. Personally, I am worse off in the last decade, which is a life-changing amount for me. There's no wonder I haven't been on holiday or had a new car in that time. But, you know, not only is it that in my pocket, but also the my pension. And, you know, I'm looking forward to retirement. I won't lie to you. It's not very long away. And yet my pension contribution, you know, my pension pot has decreased. So that means, God willing, I'll have a long retirement. My standard of living throughout that is going to be impacted by it all. And you're right, they are taking us absolutely for fools.